Well, that's the greatest goof, right? The idea that anybody knows what they're doing.
Right, exactly. It's like we're sitting here trying to figure out the technology. I mean, obviously, YouTube's been around for the better part of 15 years or more. And, and I've been able to do a couple of little cool things, but, you know, a podcast, what the fuck is that?
Podcasts I could do, but like if getting on like some of these like TikTok or something with these crazy videos that like the production value on those things look like it's done by some studio or something. I'm like, yeah, I'm not keeping up with that.
Yeah, that's a little too much for me. So I figure we could just do this a little raw and see what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't have a format or anything like this, but I guess we could start and I can get into the editing process. So I guess I got to do like an intro for the show.
All right.
So I got to see where we're at with that. So let's go ahead. So, quick introduction. Welcome to at Simpin Ain't Easy podcast, where we dive into the heart of politics, relationships, and business with unfiltered conversations and fresh perspectives. I'm Vincent Gervasi, your host, unpacking the ideas that shape your lives and drive our world forward. Each episode will explore what matters most, challenge assumptions, and spark meaningful dialogue. So, buckle up. This is where curiosity meets clarity. So let's get started. Tonight's guest is Chris M. King, known as the Executive Witch Doctor. Welcome, Chris.
Good to see you, man. It's I gotta tell you, for a guy who says he doesn't know what he's doing, that was a pretty banging intro.
Dude, that's all about grok right there, man. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, brother.
Right. Just like let that do it and read. Good. Well done, sir.
Exactly. So, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? Oh man, that's an interesting question. Well, what do? I get hired when people have seemingly impossible goals and very little time to achieve them. So you can call it a coaching or consulting company, a little kind of a hybrid of both, but really we do one thing and one thing only, and simply put, we do that which simply cannot be done. So
Very cool. Very cool. So, a couple of things. I guess my first question is, how'd you get into this business of like consulting and and doing all of that? So I mean, I know that you kind of have a rags to riches story, and I'd like to get a little bit of your background in.
well, how I got into this, low barrier to entry. That's right.
Just like me.
Right. Let's
No
see.
expectations.
I don't have a PhD or anything. No, but there is kind of an interesting trajectory to it. So it's sort of a riches to riches story, and the rags part was kind of all my doing. That was a choice that I made, strangely enough. But I grew up. I would say I had a dysfunctional, childhood, but that implies there's another kind, right? So I just had my flavor of that. And ultimately, what I learned is that everything in my physical world reality, everything in my life is ultimately my responsibility. Things in my past may or may not have been my fault, but all of it is my responsibility. And so once I started learning that, I learned that everything is a result of what started in here. And so if something is wrong out here, something is wrong in here. And so I had to recode this so that I could produce something else out there. And so what I say is I'm really just a systems hacker. Everything is a system, whether it's a corporate team that I'm working with or an individual. Reality itself is the end result of a system. Any system can be hacked and recoded if you understand how that system works. And my life being, I should say more accurately, me creating the shit show of my life time and time again. At some point I realized, okay, I got to do a lot of work here, and I'm still doing it, frankly. Here I am 5 decades in, and I'm still doing the work.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I mean, through all transparency and just kind of telling our audience, basically I used your service, but the unique part of all of that is I didn't need you for the business aspect of it, or I didn't need you for finance. Which was really kind of a blessing, is the fact that you took me on because I needed a complete life hack.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing with the business. So in regards to that, it was just like my personal life had just completely cratered. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I was delving into all sorts of manifestations of addictions at that point in time, and I was just basically just I just hit a wall.
Mhm.
And a mutual friend of ours introduced or introduced me to you, or at least
Right.
suggested that I reach out to you. And so it was on. And so when you came up with that philosophy of basically everything is our responsibility, that kind of opened up another doorway where I decided where I was going to go back into recovery.
Mm.
And so I did try the AA route, and for me at least I couldn't relate anymore.
Mhm.
And so where I really kind of set root and kind of really like took a bite out of it was the Al-Anon, the other side, the codependent side of the bottle, which was really interesting. And the funny thing is as I continued on and progressing through, like not only what your philosophy was had shown, or at least drawn out of me, was the fact that when I got into recovery, I was almost like I had a better foundation, because now it was all about me. And
Mhm.
that's how, and then I don't know if you remember, like one of our last sessions, I said, maybe I should write a fucking book about all the fucked up relationships I had. I don't know if you remember that
I
conversation.
do. I
And,
do.
and so, and as a result of going through Al-Anon and going through my 4-step, I ended up writing Simpin Ain't Easy.
It's
So,
amazing what you can do when the lights come on, you know?
it just, well, and that's the thing. I think it's just you just kind of need a life hack, right? And the thing is for people like me who haven't had clear direction. I mean, I and you and I have discussed this to infinitum. I've bumped into walls everywhere. And finally, like going through your program and finding a direction, like finding true north, like for me, right?
Mhm.
We've heard that used before, and the literature that you have, like why can't I remember it now? Of course I did. It was John. What was the John book that you told me about? Do you remember the name of that?
Oh, you're talking about Iron John?
Iron John, that's the one. Yeah. Which was really interesting, because it was an introspect, like it was like the journey from becoming a boy to man, and having to take back your manhood from, well, I'm not going to blow the thing. If people are interested, they can go check out Iron John. But yeah, so that was the connection. So now dealing with the business side, because I dealt with it more on the personal side, but the business side. So like, how are your clients reacting to today's like atmosphere? Like, I mean, is shit hitting the fan, like from what you from like as far as, because California, because you're in Southern California, I'm in Northern California. Shit's hitting the fan everywhere. how
Mhm.
how are some of your clientele responding to this? How are you adjusting to this?
How the client responds is directly impacted by how long they've been my client. If
This
they're
is true.
brand new, they're like, right? If they've been working with me for like 3 months, they're like, "Pfft, yeah, got this," right? So, I mean, we work very quickly. I mean, I think
Right.
that's the thing with us is that I had a client, he he was talking about he had problems at home and at business because they affect each other, right? And he's got a very successful business, and he said, this this is not quite what I expected. He's thinking like this kind of like dollars per hour sort of thing. And I said, look, let me frame it for you just in terms of speed and effectiveness. I said, you could try and work this out in therapy, for example. You're going to spend the next, I don't know, 3 years trying to do that. And it's probably not going to work, and the money you spend, if you spend, I don't know what, $300 an hour for therapy over 3 years, 50 weeks a year, you're looking at $45,000 and it's not going to work.
I don't remember how much they charge. I had to fire mine before I took
I
you
mean,
on.
yeah, anywhere from, 175 to, 250, $300 or something. I said, but what would it be worth if you could do it successfully in 3 months? Like
Right.
unsuccessfully in 3 years or successfully in 3 months, right? Like we're quick. And I think that that's where the magic really is, because success, however you define it, loves speed. Like wealth managers or bankers or finance people know money loves speed. Freaking loves it, right? So success, however you measure it. So that's why you got to be quick, not just fast, but quick. Like anybody can get fast over time, but quick is the ability to be fast in a hurry.
Right. Well, so I mean, because that almost contradicts the other philosophy. Because do you remember? Do you remember as we were going through this and I was banging my head up against the wall? You kept telling me, smooth, slow
Slow
is
is
smooth,
smooth and
and
smooth is
smooth is
fast.
fast. Right.
Yeah, I
And
learned that from the SEALs that I train with.
see that's another interesting dynamic, and that's what I'm getting at is like, you know, everybody wants instant gratification. I'm guilty of it. Fuck. I mean, it's like those dopamine hits, right? Constantly, whether it
Mhm,
be alcohol, sex, buying, credit card bills, whatever, buying on Amazon. It's all about dopamine hits.
mhm,
But where I really saw like the growth in my life, and where I is being able to even sit down and writing the book and doing my 4 step and realizing that when I had writer's block, I didn't freak out about it.
mhm,
It's like I sat down for 6 weeks, I think, and just slammed through like 40,000 words, something ridiculous like that. And then
mhm,
all of a sudden it was just like, nothing.
mhm.
And then I let it sit and simmer for another 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden it was bam, just like it was. So that's the magic of it all. It's like we have this idea that everything needs to happen now, and from a societal and with the new regime that we have in place, I really don't want to get too deep into the weeds regarding political ideals, but what I'm noticing is that we don't have any fucking patience. And like, and I'll just bring up the Epstein files. Everybody's shitting, last week about the Epstein files, and it's like, how come they won't release? And then, and we got everybody going nuts, right, about the Epstein files. And I stepped back and I was like thinking about it, and I was like, what if, right, this Epstein, let's just say this Epstein list does actually exist, right? What if maybe they're trying to nail some of these politicians and some of these yahoos with bigger charges than just sex trafficking? Maybe they're actually trying to get them on treason or something of that, and that lesser charge is just getting in the way. Of
Hmm.
course, I don't know. I'm a conspiracy theorist, so it's like, but what I'm getting at is like everybody wants this instant gratification. They get upset when they don't get it. And so how do you help your clientele like slow them down?
The work generally feels painfully slow because what people are looking for, they when they say they want results fast and they want it right now kind of thing, what they're talking about is like an end result physical world reality. So let's take getting everybody has some kind of relationship with fitness, getting in shape, losing weight, whatever. We've all been there, done that at some point, at least most of us, I think. Um, and so people are like, yeah, I want to just magically wake up and be in shape or something. And so they start dealing with this at the physical end of the energetic spectrum. I'm gonna go down a little bit of the rabbit hole here, so bear with me. I won't make it complicated.
Is this the woo-woo stuff you were telling
It's
me about?
no, this is more about energy fields. This is more about science and
Mm.
subatomic physics.
All right, cool.
I mean, I can
You
frame it
gotta.
in woo language
I'm
if you want, right?
I'm a neophyte, so you got to keep. You got to dumb it down a couple of
All right,
levels.
yeah, yeah. No, I'll make it simple. So like the chair that you're sitting in, the desk that you're at, the physical properties, right, at the atomic and subatomic level are basically nothing. There's like nothing there, right? So it's not so much a physical thing as it is compressed energy. So physical world reality, matter, is the slowest moving energy, right? And so when we're talking about our physical form, right, that again is the slower energy. That's a physical world reality. And this is where people start working on that problem. They're going to go to the gym and they're going to start eating healthier or whatever. That's not where the problem started. That's where the problem finished. So what
Right.
they're
Okay.
doing is they're starting at the bottom end and then basically swimming upstream against the flow of reality and how it unfolds. And that takes willpower, which is an exhaustible resource. It's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of energy, so it's painfully slow. So when you go jump into the physical end and try and make this happen quickly, it's a grind and it's really hard. And so the way that reality unfolds starts in the energetic, in kind of this ethereal sort of frequency, right?
Right.
So instead of adjusting, trying to get that physical world reality result quickly, you focus on the energy, the frequency that you need that supports that physical world reality. That's what makes it happen so quickly and a lot easier. It swims downstream with the flow of reality instead of swimming upstream against how it unfolds. So, what does that look like in practical terms? It means instead of going to the gym for an hour and grinding it out, spend 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week thinking about being fit. Like imagining it, settling into that. What would that feel like? How would that be? What would your body, what would be different? Like start to notice and project kind of, in that imagination space a little bit. How might that feel for you? Now, even if somebody is sitting there right now and just take a minute and go, how would that feel to be in the shape of your dreams? All of a sudden, you already feel better as soon as it clicks in, you go, oh, wow. Well, now you've adjusted, you've made a physiological change in your neurochemistry, the way the neurotransmitters are firing. You've just had a physiological effect in your brain. And this is why visualization exercises work so well. Like that's where you start. And so that's kind of how to come at this from a different way. And here's the great part about this. It is instant gratification. You instantly feel better. You imagine that being in shape, go, wow, that already instantly right now today. Going to the gym is just going to make you sore today.
Yeah, that really brings a really nuanced idea to the or at least a nuanced definition to the to the slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And this is one of those things that I also introduced in my book as well. Like do 5 things a day, that is going to introduce you. And I think I used the example of doing push-ups, like, being overweight and, and struggling with weight myself my entire life. I wasn't able to put together 5 push-ups to save my life. Even having been in the military, once I got out, it was like I gave up on physical exercise and taking care of myself. And so a lot of that shit went down. So I started with 5 pussy push-ups. It was just like on my knees and just kind of just cranking them out until I could actually do 5 regular push-ups, right? And then I just increased it from day to day. And how that manifested later on was doing a century ride. I don't know if I told you, but I did a century ride in September after I broke my shoulder and
I
went
say
into
after you got all
surgery.
busted up, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so that was an amazing accomplishment. Going from 256 pounds or something. Now I've increased a little bit of weight. I'm at 214, but yeah, it was an amazing accomplishment. So. And even
Sure you do.
now, dude, I brought this. I'm doing a 3-mile ruck every day with my boys with a 40-pound rucksack. So I'm like
Wow.
going
Good for
back into my
you.
military roots and just kind
Right?
of just building up that muscle and that stamina. So yeah, just getting healthy. But it didn't start that way. It started out with just doing like 10 laps around the dog park. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'll say this to clients, that the goal isn't the goal. The same way the problem isn't the problem. Like if you have a company and you have employee retention problems, that's not your problem. That's the result of your problem. Goals work the same way. It's like I want to get in shape. That's not the goal. That's the result of what is it the result. That's the goal. Right? So the goal
Right.
becomes about smart choices. The goal becomes about how you feel, the way you think. It's the end result happens later. Like I'm in great shape, right? I mean, I'm 54. I'm not a big guy like you. I mean, I'm 5'6". I'm 145 pounds soaking wet, and I'm shredded. And I'm happy to say that, not from an egoic standpoint, but it was never a goal. It's simply the byproduct of a lifestyle. My goal was to feel a certain way and to live a certain way. That just happened. So
Right, right. So it's just basically the result of whatever actions you're putting into place.
exactly. So if,
Right.
whatever goal yours, you want to double your business, that's not the goal. That's the result of what is it the result? That becomes the goal, right?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense because I've already gone through your course and I've
Mm-hmm.
gone through your coaching. So, and like I said, it manifested itself completely, which again, I mean, I came into this thing for all of my personal problems. It had nothing to do with the business app. From a financial perspective, I was
Hmm.
fine. I'm
Yeah.
happy in my career and all that other
Hmm.
stuff. I'm comfortable being that average Joe, so to speak. Although I don't think there's anything average about me, but that's what she said. I went there, brother.
There
I
it
went
is. There it is.
there.
And about what, 15 minutes in? Where are we? 20 minutes?
That's it. We're right into the gutter.
Right.
This is exactly what I wanted to do with this podcast. But again, as I did continue to digress, um, um, it was just about that mind shift and just kind of reprogramming the operating system that you mentioned earlier, right? It's just
Yeah,
like
because
getting that different idea going, right? So,
yeah, because that's what's driving your reality. And you said something really interesting a moment ago. You had said it manifested itself. Like it almost happened on its own, right? Because you changed the inner game, which cycled through reality, changed the outer game.
well, that's the thing. It's like the challenges. I think, like, for example, like putting together this podcast, I sat on this idea for a couple of years. I mentioned it to different people. And then finally, it was just kind of one of those things. It's like, you know what? This isn't going to just take off on my own or on its own. It's just going to sit here and then I'm just going to put it to action, throw some shit up against the wall and see what sticks. Or,
Hmm.
Jello or spaghetti or whatever other, euphemism somebody wants to use. But this was the whole concept, and I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do, like especially with recovery and just moving forward in life. It's like
Hmm.
I am, and you mentioned it right at the beginning. Was like, yeah, we I don't know if I have it all figured out yet. And here's the crazy part: it's like we got this generation of youngsters, and I might be shifting gears here, but we got this generation of youngsters that think that they need to be making 150,000, 200,000 a year, that their life should be all put together by 23. Man, at 23 was like, that was the challenge. And here I am at 53, still not able to figure out exactly where life is going to go. And one of the other spiritual journeys that I've been going through, I've been kind of perusing through the Bible and trying to get, in check and start reading the scripture. And there's absolutely no guarantee that that the Bible states that life was going to be smooth. No guarantees in any way, shape, or form. So at 53 and still having doubts, it's okay, you
Yeah,
know,
there's no supposed to.
right?
I think we get in our this idea in our heads. Then we have these benchmarks like by this age I should have this or do that or be here or whatever. And there's all these check marks along the way. And what I see in a lot of people is they end up creating an imaginary stick by which to measure themselves and then forever come up short. And it's
Right.
like, look, the stick is just a fantasy. This is just some nonsense that you created in your mind and are now using to feel shitty about yourself. Well, is that, I mean, look, at the risk of sounding like Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? Like, it's like, well, the best way to feel shitty about yourself is compare yourself to other people, compare yourself to, you know, anything, compare your, like, all, it's simply, what do you want? What do you want to experience in this life, and what do you need to do to be aligned with that? Look,
There was
I have done as much shitting on myself as the next person, and maybe more, to the point where I've created some real messes in my life, even recently, and just because I was so busy not really feeling great about myself and not even necessarily being aware of it. And it's like, well, no wonder that this didn't work out the way that I thought. No wonder that I drove into a ditch here. It's like, because look at where I was looking. I was looking at myself in a ditch. So,
Yeah, and that's really interesting that you say that because you almost kind of project your own disasters, or manifest your own, or your own self-fulfilling prophecy of
mhm.
destruction. And I find myself, even today, after having had, 30 years of therapy and in and out of 12-step programs and recovery, I still find myself going back to those habits for lack of a better word, or those instincts that were, the survival traits that I had when I was younger. And
Mhm.
however, I think the difference now, at least for me, at least today, is like I can take a moment to pause and respond to those feelings instead of reacting. And I
Mhm.
think that's a key component there, because there's a huge difference in reacting to a situation and responding. It's like, yeah, you can make a mistake and that's all right. Be aware of that mistake and then make those adjustments to change. And I think there's a message in there that for some reason our generation was able to get, and I don't know if it's just because we just got kicked in the teeth a lot. Um However, like, there's a concern for future generations because they're selling themselves out to some ideologies, and you're seeing it, like this splitting or this bifurcation of society, men versus women, this versus that, and so on and so forth. And it's like no, the asshole in the mirror, that's the one that you need to be paying attention to.
You
You're
know,
gonna probably say it way more eloquently than I will.
well, I don't know how eloquent this is, but what I've said many times in the past, I even posted on social media. I said, it's easy to get, to get fed up with somebody else's bullshit. It's effective to get fed up with my own.
That makes a lot of sense. I never heard you say that. Is that something new that you just came across, or?
I don't know. I mean, these things, you know how it works with me. It doesn't come from me; it comes through me. Like I'll
Yeah.
say something like, "Wow, that was awesome. Where did that come from?" But
Yeah, your 90 seconds of silence, and I'm like, "Are you there, Chris? Did you hear what I said?"
oh yeah, when I my little spaced out moments, when like, hang on, I like, yeah.
It's like, hold on,
Part
I'm
of my process.
processing.
Like just hang. I tell clients when I say hang on, just hang on. I'm gonna stare
Just
off at the wall for a second. It might be a second. It might be a couple of minutes. Just hang on.
hold on. I'm putting it together. I'm figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I said just if I say hang on, just hang on. If you don't hang on, you keep talking. I'm gonna lose it. And so whatever it is, but yeah, it's true. It's you can get tired of somebody else's shit, or you can get tired of your own. One just gets you annoyed. The other one gets you traction.
Right, right. Um I just had it right on the tip of my tongue, and then I completely lost it. This
It'll
is
come
what
back. Don't worry
it's
about it.
like it's like uh uh, it's like, fuck it, we'll just do it live. So anyways, let's move forward here. We're in a marriage and relationships. What are some of the key factors, I mean, because I know that if there's one part of your life, for example, business, if it's suffering, then more than likely there's probably other parts of your life that obstruction or that chaos is brewing and developing. How does Chris and his clientele, like, how do we deal with like employee just relationships in generals, right? It's just like, how does Chris's technique, help benefit, the world at large, so to speak, in regards to
Mm,
relationships? Is that kind of
yeah.
too much?
No, but I'll give you a really deep answer though,
For sure.
because it's a good question. So I'll just get to the meat of this for you. Your relationship to everyone and everything in this world is derived from your relationship to you. So when somebody comes in with whatever they're working on, business, personal, otherwise, they come in. One of the things that is absolute in this work is that their relationship to themselves is going to change dramatically. It's going to radically improve. And that is going to radically improve their relationship with and to everyone and everything else in their world. Now, improve sometimes means terminate, like just some people can't, maybe that chapter is done because you're moving out of where you were and moving into where you're going. And some people are not going to be able to track with you. Like I said, this work is quick. And so it's got this hockey stick trajectory. And not everybody is necessarily going to be able to track with you on that curve. And so you may lose some people, but it's creating the space for the next thing. And then, whether they're people or situations or whatever. Um, and so that's it, it does require, kind of a radical surrender sometimes into the acknowledgement that, well, my relationship with this person is going to change. or maybe it's even going to end if it no longer serves where you're going.
You bring up a good point, and I think it has a lot to do with like intent as well. Because I was I was in a year-long relationship, and I remember before. Gosh, when was the last time you and I like actually worked together? I mean, we've been friends for the last 3 years, so probably about 3 years, maybe late or early, yeah, early 2023, something like that. And I remember one of the last things you said. You even said it like you got no damn business getting into a relationship until you figure your shit out. Something along those lines, right? I'm
I was probably
paraphrasing.
projecting that onto you. That was probably for me, you know.
It's possible. I mean, we do. Well, the Democrat Party has a tendency of projecting everything on everybody else. So, anyways, I digress. Um, but if I can't make shitty jokes, then what's the? Why do I got to have a podcast? But in the relationship, so I had been in a relationship for about a little over 14 months, and it was a great relationship. She was a good person, good human being. Everything was on point. However, things still fell through the cracks. And as I continued to analyze that relationship, I fell onto, I think I may have mentioned it earlier, I fell into intent. And I think that kind of coincides with what you had. You got no business getting into a relationship until I figure my stuff out. And I think it's tracking now, three years later, because of the fact that I didn't have an intent to get married. I didn't have an intent to actually stay in a long term relationship. It was just kind of like winging it, like I had mentioned earlier, throwing Jello up against the wall and see what sticks. Well,
Right, right,
if
right.
you have no intent, then there's no reason why I should be in any relationship. Again, she was a great human being. It was probably one of the best if you read my book, well, I know you read my book, but you realize that there was a lot of shitty relationships in there. This one was definitely at the top of the top. Great quality of woman, great, absolutely just stunning in every aspect of a human, but it didn't work because again, it all falls down to it falls on the person in the mirror, right? And the thing is I didn't have an intent, and I think that was where it takes a while to get to that. I mean, we almost 2 months now. I think we
Yeah,
so
and this was very specific to where you were at the time, right? And I understood this because I lived it too. This is kind of this idea. It's like, you know, like a dog chasing a car. It's like, what are you going to do with it if you catch it, right? If you don't have an answer to that question, it's like, okay, you're out and you're dating and well, I want to get a girlfriend. It's like, okay, but why? Like, what is there a purpose for this? Is like, what is it you're building or creating here? If you don't know, because I've done that. I mean, I've led my such a huge portion of my life with chaos and without a plan, without specificity, without focus, without vision, just like, let's see where this road goes. Well, sometimes that gets you into some quicksand or, drive off a cliff or whatever. Like, and I can't count how many times I've fucked things up because I just came at it from a very chaotic sort of angle. And especially as a man, I think you need to have a vision and you need to have a plan and how you're going to make that happen. Now, the plan is probably going to have some adjusting along the way. But it hasn't worked for me personally with the whole not knowing what I'm doing.
Well, that's exactly it. There needs to be some clarity. There needs to be at least something in your heart that's going to guide you. And then hopefully logic prevails and also keeps you on the straight and narrow, so to speak. I know I use a lot of analogies and euphemisms, man, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of the Vinceisms. um, However, okay, so like having that understanding and coming in, so like there's again, I talked about the bifurcation of society, men versus women, and all of that, and those romantic relationships. We won't even get into all the other stuff. It's just there's just too much. However, this younger generation, I mean, there's a lot of kids who are really frustrated, especially young men. You hear in the news all the time that, we got 30, 35-year-olds that are virgins and have never dated, and which is, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, I think the virgin concept is cool. It's like, I wish somebody would have explained it to me a lot better. The sex education aspect of it, because of all the chaos that I got myself into, chasing vagina. However, but there seems to be like this drop off. There's all these other problems, like the family's falling apart, and again, it's just way too much. But if you were to be talking to a young guy, 25, 26, just out of college, getting started in his career, what kind of advice would you give, homie, and in regards to relationships and whatnot? I mean, would the intent question come up, right?
Well, at 25, you are
Better
finally
yet,
you are.
what would you tell yourself at 25?
Oh, if I okay, that's a different answer. Because at 25, I mean, it's actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, it's not all that different. I would
I
tell
didn't think it
myself,
would be.
look, I'd say, Chris, you are just now barely a biological adult. Okay, the idea that, legally you're an adult at 18 is fucking stupid. Okay, you still got 7 more years before your brains are fully developed, right? This is why anybody that has kids that become adults and they say you get your kids back when they're about 25, it's because their brains are finally developed, right? Up until that point, they're just fucking talking lizards, right? That's
Right.
all teenagers are. They're humans, they're talking lizards. So I would tell my 25-year-old self, said, look, man, you spend the next 5, 6 years figuring out who you are and building your empire. Forget about women. Like, if you want to go out on a date or whatever, but no, this idea of getting into something, I kind of like this old school thinking of go out, become the man that you're going to be in the world, and then invite, become the king of your kingdom, whatever that looks like. And then invite your queen in, go find her and invite her in. Don't try and build this at the same time. Like, figure out who you are, what you're about, what's important, get your values dialed in, get your code locked in, right? Learn how to be in integrity. And then, when you're around, maybe you've had a few at bats, you're 30, you're 31, then you start thinking, all right, now I'm going to start finding somebody. By the time, you're mid 30s, early 30s, 33, 34, you've got her, you've got it figured out. Now you're ready to go, right? If I'd have done that, I would have saved myself 20 years or more.
See, I'm right along there with you, because if I had learned the skill set to be a little bit more stoic and a little bit more virtuous, and actually taking the time to develop myself instead of chasing beer and vagina, things probably. And again, I can't say that I regret. And I wrote about my regrets in my 4 step, um but what I'm getting at is that it's like, I'm here now, so what am I going to do now, right? However, a lot of these young kids can save themselves like 30 years of pain and anguish if they just slowed down,
Slow down. Slow is
right?
smooth and smooth is
This
fast.
fast,
You'll
right?
get there a lot quicker by going slower. This work
Right.
is very paradoxical and sometimes directly contradictory, and I'm aware of that. But so
Right.
are people. Like, so
Exactly,
are humans.
right? Well, and but the thing is ultimately there's a theme here, right? There's accountability, obviously, because I mean, I keep coming back to the douchebag in the mirror, right? And so, and then at the same time, it's like, it's like, wait, let's slow down. Let's not react. Let's like take our time to figure it out and respond. And, and now that I'm actually saying that, do you remember that movie? And it was in the night, we're Gen X. So, do you remember the movie Colors?
Oh, yeah. Sean
Oh,
Penn.
and you remember that story that gosh, what was the actor? He was telling Sean Penn about the story about the bull going down the hill.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. I won't blow it. So if you guys
Right.
are interested, if the audience is interested in watching, go rent the movie Colors and you'll see. But I'm not getting into it. However, again, coming back full circle, where you said come into their manhood, and that is what the story of Iron John was. The thing is we as young men, especially today, I don't think we have an opportunity or even give ourselves the opportunity to come into our manhood, and I think that's a huge issue right now in society. Again,
Mhm.
I'm opinionated, but you know,
No, no, this is just scientifically true. I mean, there's a huge. I mean, in any single woman in her 30s, 40s, 50s, she'll be the first one to tell you, like, yeah, men are a mess. Like, we are really in crisis, and it's been happening for the last 80 years. And I can talk chapter and verse about this, so I'll be succinct here. But our generation, we're really raised by absentee fathers, overbearing fathers, abusive fathers, some combination thereof. We don't really understand that there's no rite of passage, right? Like, today you are a man, you are invited along the hunt. Tribal societies understand this. Like, you got to remove Junior from mom and grow his ass up, and there's a rite of passage. They go on the hunt or go out in the jungle and kill a wild boar or something. If you get eaten, too bad, Junior. Like, you have to earn that, and we don't have that in Western culture. And so books, I recommend, there's a lot of books I recommend. Iron John is one of them, by Robert Bly. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore. I think there's the Read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Jack Donovan's got a book. He's kind of, I don't know, it's a little dated. I think he sounds a little sexist sometimes, but Jack Donovan, The Way of Men. But understanding that in order to have a really conscious grown ass man, they need to be raised by conscious grown ass men, and they need that community. And we really don't have that. We've got these sort of pseudo rites of passage. There's gangs, there's the military. We have sort of pseudo, like, what I'll call a toxic mimicry of the real thing when it comes to male bonding. We got sports and shit like that, and it's not really connection. It's just this sort of band-aid thing. And so if a young man or any man comes to me and says, Chris, I really got to get this part of me dialed in, give me your advice. I'll say, look, you really want to do something, go out with some Native Americans or some tribes, go out in the jungle, dance naked around a fire for about a week. That's going to learn you some shit,
right.
because we really are in crisis. And men in particular need a lot of compassion right now and a lot less judgment.
Yeah, I'm again. We agree. I mean, we're friends for a reason. I mean, so I don't necessarily want to make this an echo chamber, but I mean, a lot of the things that you and I have been through have been pretty much, the same experiences, same feelings, different experiences.
Yeah.
We've traveled our own roads,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah.
Well, I would say this
Um,
speaks directly to what I talked about before. The crisis among men today isn't the problem. It's the result of what is it the result. That's the fucking problem.
Right. So that's okay. So, like, getting into it, and again, we could look at culture, we can look at politics, we can look at, I mean, if you had an opinion, and I know you do, I mean, where do you think our problem went or started from?
Well, it started post World War II. Our young men, our boys, were raised by, dad went off to work, and they were raised by their mothers and their teachers, which were overwhelmingly women. And so what happened is that these boys didn't learn how to stand up and be a man. What they learned was to seek the approval of women. The masculine fucking hates approval seeking. But this is why, when I was younger, before the online dating thing, a guy would show up to pick up a girl for a date, and he'd be like, so what do you want to do? Like, where do you want to go? Like, he had no plan. He had no idea, because he's taught that, oh, I need to do what she wants and make sure she's happy and give what she, and it's just, there's nothing sexy about that, right? And so the masculine definitely likes to lead, but he also needs to know what he's leading to. And so the way I look at masculine and feminine energy and polarity is that I think women are like the CEO of the company, right? She's in charge of the vision and direction. So this is true of a family, whatever. She's in charge of, like, this is the house I want. This is the home I want. This is the vision, right? He's like the president. He's the day-to-day make it happen, in charge of that, right? So she's in charge of the vision direction. He's in charge of the execute, make it happen. This is the masculine in service to the feminine. And in return, the feminine restores the masculine, right? So it's a beautiful dance. Ballroom dancing is a great example of this. You've got the man that holds the container and the frame and keeps everything set and held in there, and she does all the cool stylistic stuff and everything, and this is him in service to her and her restoring him, right? And it's this beautiful dance. And so and we lost that along the way. You know, our boys were taught to seek approval instead of, you know, be put on a mission of like, here's the vision, here's what we're doing. And this is why, you know, I usually will tell, especially the women in my life, you know, you can have me do it or you can have it done your way, but not both. Tell me what you want done and I will get it done, but leave me to get it done, right? Because the masculine needs that, right?
Absolutely. And see that, and that was the whole mantra that I felt after in my marriage. And it was a short marriage, just like, you know, every every other one of my relationships. I laugh about this shit. You got to laugh about it. But the happy wife, happy life mantra. And then it wasn't about till, I don't know, 9 years later, uh there was a different way. It was a happy house, happy spouse. And the thing is
Right.
like, how do we get to that?
Well,
Right?
again, but that's
Because
not
it's
from approval seeking, right? That's from execution on that vision.
right, exactly. And having an intent, right? So how do we go from this idea of you know, seeking affection, attention, and affirmation from people outside of us? Obviously, we have to look inward and make sure that we are taken care of and looking, you know, to provide ourselves our own affection, attention, affirmation, right? And I know that sounds a little wonky,
No,
but
you love yourself, man. You gotta love
right,
yourself.
exactly. And that's something that I don't think, and going back to the that tribe analogy that you provided about taking yourself out, you know, like going out with the village elders or whatever. And the thing is this is where a man would learn to take care of himself, right? And I'm not talking about like, you know, manscaping and all that other good. I'm talking about like going in and going and actually facing diversity and learning to manage those diversity or that diversity you know, under your own terms, right? And of course you have a watchful eye of, you know, your guardian or whatever to kind of guide you through that. And it kind of falls back into what you were saying, is like we had these absentee fathers, you know, heavy-handed alcoholic fathers, you know, abusive and so on and so forth. So we never really had that opportunity. And I think at one point in time, society did offer a group known as the Boy Scouts to
Mhm.
kind of help develop those things like
Yeah.
stoicism and whatnot. And again, I'm not going to get into all of that, but you know, there was some infiltration of individuals who thought that that was a bad idea, so we needed to include females in that and so you can call me a misogynist or whatever. I know that's complete bullshit, but I think there's a level of misandry that goes on where women want to always have their fingers in the cookie jar when it don't belong there. And I'm not casting shade. It's just one of those situations where it's like nobody talks about this shit.
Yeah. No,
So
you're
getting
right.
back to
There
the
are
happy,
organizations that are, look, I've never met the Eagle Scout that was an asshole. I just
you
haven't.
know what,
You
you're,
know,
yeah,
I
you're
just
actually, when
haven't.
I come to think of it, it's like, yeah,
You
they're
know,
actually
Be-
pretty legit.
because they were taught some responsibility and they were taught to be of service. And you know, and look, there are a lot of organizations out there around. There's a you know, Inner King is out there. Mankind Project International is out there. Like there's a lot of this stuff out there. It's just really, you know, there isn't a lot of attention on this. Society doesn't really, you know, the powers that be don't really want capable, strong, independent men that can think, you know. And so, you know, I can get real Jordan Peterson on this kind of stuff, you know, and just
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and I've quoted them in the book too. Now, hold on. I mean, I've been dragging a whole bunch of attention to my book. Now, you got a book out there.
yeah, I wrote a book.
Uh, yeah. And I don't remember the title, so I think you should pitch it.
It's quite. I think I remember it. It's I mean, it's a toolbox. You know, the book is called "Renegotiate Your Existence, Unlock Your Impossible Life." It's available on Amazon. The whole idea is that, look, you've renegotiated all kinds of things in your life. You've renegotiated relationships, you renegotiated a salary or a job title, you've renegotiated you know, a price of a car. You can renegotiate your entire existence on this planet, and this is a toolbox to get you started in doing this. And it's got some case studies in there. It's got some of my personal history in there. It's a pretty easy read. I wrote it, so how complicated can it be?
Well, I made sure to write it at my grade level, which is the 8th grade, and then it seems like I still haven't escaped it.
I think you do all
I
right.
could go from zero to junior high in no problem and no time. So
I think most of us men can do that. Yeah.
absolutely. All right, so let's see. We touched on the relationship stuff. So I mean, if Chris were king, right? What would you do, or how would you contribute to the solution about this problem that we have between the sexes right now? I mean, what changes? I mean, again, this is just la la land. You're the king. What are some solutions that you can throw out there that maybe might help focus men today?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is probably the most difficult one, and the ego abso-freaking-lutely hates it. And that is the release of the judgment. And what I mean by that is, here's the label by which I'm making someone wrong or bad. I could say that they're lazy, or they're stupid, or they're irresponsible, and that is wrong, right? When we engage in judgment, it's this idea is good, that idea is bad. I am right, they are wrong. I am good, they are bad. That is inherently separation, right? That is bad, this is good. You cannot, or at least it's very difficult, to course correct from judgment. Just shame and wrong and judge somebody. And so the ego doesn't like this, but releasing the judgment doesn't mean excusing the behavior. It just means releasing the judgment. So I'll give you an example. I'm notoriously on time. Like, I'm early for pretty much everything. So somebody that's consistently late is going to irritate me, right? And if I ask 10 people, what do you say about somebody that's consistently late? What's the judgment? What's the way in which they're wrong and bad? They're going to say all kinds of things. They're going to say they're lazy, they're disrespectful, they're selfish, they're irresponsible, they're whatever, right?
Right.
But these are just subjective constructs. This is that individual's relationship to that. And so while I can say I'm not going to allow that behavior to continue, I don't have to make that person wrong for it. That doesn't mean they're disrespectful. It means it doesn't mean they're lazy. It doesn't mean they're irresponsible. So if I release the judgment, I say, okay, I choose to release my judgment of that person as irresponsible, because the truth about being on time is what? What's the reality of this? Well, being on time is a function of maybe value. Okay, so it's not that they're irresponsible. They maybe have a different set of values. Maybe being on time is a function of time management. That's a skill. So if somebody's consistently late, they are unskilled, not irresponsible or whatever. And I can move into compassion because I say, wow, it must be really hard to get through life not having that skill. Now, that is where compassion, empathy comes in, and that's the reconnection.
Compassion and grace, yeah.
And
that makes sense.
that is the place where you can potentially affect change. You can't do it from separation. You can't do it from judgment. We especially with the sexes, we can judge each other all day long. But if we can release the judgment, like I said, men right now are in crisis, and it's not the problem. It's the result of what's really going on. And we can have compassion. Now, doesn't mean we're going to let the behavior continue. Doesn't mean we're going to let these people off the hook. It means we're going to let go of the judgment so we can fix it.
Well, how much of that is like false expectations too? Because as I mentioned in my book, I talked about, like, from societal perspective, that women have a golden parachute and they're out, right? They've got outs when they get into, if they're pregnant and a single mom, big daddy government can step in and help them out and do whatever assistance and so on and so forth. However, it's like, and they expect the dad, they can take up that role. The thing is again, I want to go back to, like, the expectation of, like, men are still operating in the traditional roles. We want to provide, we want to build, we want to
Mhm.
do these things. However, like, I don't believe that we have the correct expectations, or what am I looking for? Um I think we're expecting too much from outside sources. Um, I'm thinking about this. Hold on. There was a thought. There was a form. I'm having a Chris moment where I'm like trying to
Take your
get
time.
the right signal
Tune
in.
in.
Uh, the unreasonable expectations that men cannot fulfill their inherited duties, meaning that 200,000 years of evolution, of being provider and so on, just to have the expectation that we're just going to let it all go, from a biological or evolutionary psychology perspective. Is that tracking? Is that making sense? I'm trying to get into I guess the expectation, or the yeah, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with that. Is that tracking at all? Do you
Well, I mean, there's also a function of conditioning in there, right? It's going to be very hard for a man to stand up and provide and protect in the way that he's kind of designed to if he has been conditioned to do approval seeking. It's like, oh, how do I do this? But I tell you, if
well, there's
you,
an internal conflict there.
yeah, there's your conditioning, right? So understanding what the conditioning is, how it's working, how it's not working, and then how do we recondition ourselves in a way that does. But you have to push through conditioned responses.
Explain to me a little bit more about conditioned responses. Like you said, we're going to school. We got young Vince. He's 8 years old. He's got a heavy-handed alcoholic dad.
Hmm.
Workaholic, without a doubt, among other things.
Right. So you were probably conditioned to not go to him with problems.
Right. Makes sense.
So now the idea that you would talk to your buddies about problems, no, because that's not your conditioning. It's like your conditioning is
Yeah.
going to be more, I'll figure it out. I got to deal with this on my own. I can't tell anybody. It's going to freak people out, piss people off, or whatever it is, right? Whatever the script
Right.
is. But you got to lean into that discomfort and recondition yourself to do the thing that feels unnatural,
a
because it will
real
feel
world
unnatural.
example a real world example, like you kind of hit the nail on the head. It was like, for many many years I would go to female doctors and
Hmm.
discuss my problems.
Yeah,
I would go to female psychologists or psychiatrists, and you were the first male coach that actually, and I think
I remember
because
that.
of your background and your history, uh, was the only reason why I trusted you enough to actually like open up this box, so to
Hmm.
speak, right, and get it out there. And so, coming full circle, especially with young men today, it's like they need positive role models, and it's
Hmm.
like, where do we get them?
Hmm.
Right. And you had mentioned a couple of groups, and it's like, how do we advertise them? And it's like, let's get them on my podcast,
Reach
and
out, man. I
actually let's
mean,
let's address that problem.
no, I think that it is a problem that we need to. We talk about quote unquote toxic masculinity. There's really no such thing as toxic masculinity. There are a ton of fucked up men, right? But there's
Right.
nothing toxic about masculinity. This was just a way to demonize men for being men, and ultimately weaken everybody. I mean, like right now, just because of the crisis that men are in, both men and women are hurting. Like I
Oh,
said, go find
amen.
a single
Yeah.
woman in her 40s or 50s right now. She'll tell you she's hurting, and so this crisis in masculinity is hurting everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge societal problem. Um and again, I don't have the answers. That's why, but it's fun to talk about it. That's for sure, and get into the weeds a little bit.
Right?
I want to be conscious of your time, man. We're coming up on a whole hour. How are you doing?
Yeah, I got to get something to eat.
That totally makes sense, and I can totally appreciate that. But before we take off, where can people find you, bro?
Yeah, go to the website. We got a brand new website. I absolutely love it. chrismking.com. That's got everything. It'll link you to all the social media and everything. But yeah, go to chrismking.com. Check out Moonshot is our flagship program, and that's the one where people are making seemingly impossible things happen. I had a client say that we doubled her revenues, we eliminated her stress, and we saved her marriage. That took us 4 months.
Wow,
Um,
that's really interesting how the business and the relationship kind of coincided with that little trailer of yours.
Everything affects everything. It's just how the brain works. I got a client here in Beverly Hills. He he used to come in with the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he'd talk for about 20 minutes and just air it all out, and I'd laugh at him, and I would just smile, right? And he's like, what are you laughing at? And I would just smile at him. I'd say, look at you with your little 6-figure problem. And then fast forward about, I guess it was about a year, and the same thing would happen. He'd come in and unload everything, and I just laugh at him. He go, what? Why are you laughing? And I just say, look at you with your little 7-figure problems. Just so people call us when they want the no way, I can't believe that's possible kind of thing. So
Very cool. So, for our audience, chrismking.com. Chris, brother, I appreciate you. Thank you hopefully, we'll get this thing off the ground and see what happens. I had a lot of fun with you, man. Love you, mean it, man. You be good. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you
love you
soon.
too, brother. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Bye.